either the target group is having or is perceived to have as having a competitive or cooperative relationship with the mainstream society, and the second social factor was either the target group is of relatively low or high social status within the mainstream society, right? Then we were discussing in the last class about the three forms of prejudice, right? In that we started with the first forms of prejudice in that we discussed the first forms of prejudice, that is the contemporist prejudice, right? This one. So in this, what happened? They basically say is that contemporist prejudice is if a group has a relatively low social status and is perceived as having a competitive relationship with the mainstream society, then they have or then we can found the contemporist prejudice. So contemporist prejudice आपका तब होगा जब जो target group है low status has low status and the group is perceived as having a competitive relationship with the mainstream society. And we have discussed with respect to the gender, women are perceived some years back, women are perceived as women have a low status, right, and is perceived as having a competitive relationship with the mainstream society, right? Then we can found the contemporist prejudice. The next is the ambivalent prejudice. Under this ambivalent prejudice, there are two forms of prejudice, that is the envious prejudice and the paternalistic prejudice, right? Under this ambivalent prejudice, it says that this prejudice consists of both positive and negative attitude, right? So in this, it says that towards the target group, you will be having both the positive attitude and negative attitude. इसका मतलब ये हुआ, for example, if for example you meet towards a woman, you may have a feeling of both positive. For example, sympathy, empathy, right, or help, care, right? These are the positive attitude, right? In the same way, you may have a negative feeling also. For example, fear, envy. Right? So this ambivalent prejudice states that in this kind of prejudice, a person can find both the positive and the negative attitude. In the past, that is the envious prejudice and the paternalistic prejudice. Envious prejudice, feeling of resentment and hostility are mixed with fear and envy, as well as with the positive emotion, respect, and admiration. So in this, what happened? A person is having a feeling of hostility, right? Where you have a feeling of fear, jealousy, as well as you have a feeling of respect and admiration, right? For example, if we see that a woman may have a feeling of fear and envy towards the male group, right? But since the person is at a higher position, we give respect to that person, right? So they have feeling of both. एक hostility की feeling जो कि mix हो गई with the fear and envy, as well as they have a positive emotions towards that group. So for example, even the racism, right, which is prevalent in America, right, which was prevalent at time in America. So the black people may have a feeling of both. May have a feeling of hostility, right, because they are not able to they are not able to fulfill their interests, they are not able to achieve a target, right? So they may have a feeling of hostility towards the white people, right, and as well as at the same time they have a feeling of respect, right, because a person is at a higher positions, or maybe because of some incidents people may have a feeling of positive emotion toward that group. Is it clear, class?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, right? Okay. The next is a paternalistic prejudice, a low status group that has a cooperative or non-competitive relationship with the mainstream society. In this, what happened? The paternalistic prejudice, a low status group, a group which has a low status, it does not have any competitive relationship with the mainstream society, but have a cooperative relationship with the mainstream society. For example, it could be It could be, for example, a woman. I'm just giving an example. A woman group may have a low status, and also they have a cooperative. They are not competitive. They are a cooperative relationship with the mainstream society. Then this materialistic prejudice is prevalent. ये clear है?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? Okay. Is it clear to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
No, ma'am. Ma'am, can you explain again?
Okay. I'll just explain.
Ma'am, can you give more example of this paternalistic prejudice?
Okay, sure. Okay, just give me a minute. Just 2 minutes. Okay, the paternalistic prejudice basically means this group or the particular group or the target group has a low status and have a cooperative relationship. So the what happened when they have a cooperative or non-competitive relationship with the mainstream society, they have or the other group, you can say that not the target group, have a feeling towards them as a warm feeling towards them. For example, if we consider the women, if they have a low status group and they are non-competitive relationship, so what could be the feeling of the other group towards them, right? कि अगर low status group है and they are not competing, so you may have a positive feeling or warm feeling towards them. Okay. I'll just give an example. Okay. So, for example, this is not an appropriate example, but I'm just giving an example. Example. So, for example, science, there are in schools, there are different different sections came, different streams came. For example, one section is dedicated to science stream, one section to commerce, and one section to humanities. Right? For example, we sometimes or in some areas people think that the students who have opted for humanities do not have good marks or do not have good percentage. That's why they opted for humanities. This is the scenario some people perceive like this, right? So what happened? So for example, if the other group, for example, the science stream, is perceived this C group or the C batch or section C, which is basically the ह्यूमनिस्टिक के बच्चे या आर्ट्स के बच्चे उन्हें वो परसीव करते हैं दे आर इन लो स्टेटस, राइट, एंड दे हैव अ नॉन कॉम्पिटिटिव बिकॉज दे आर नॉट गोइंग टू कम्पीट, दे आर नॉट गोइंग टू गिव द एंट्रेंस एग्जामिनेशंस, राइट. So you may have a feeling of warm, you may have a positive feeling towards them, right, because they are in a they are having a non-cooperative relationship and they are having a non-competitive relationship with the mainstream society. Is it clear? Making sense? Or should I give another example?
No, ma'am, it's clear.
Or I will just give me an example. The tribes, right? The people, the tribal population, or tribes basically, right? They live in, for example, you may find tribes in Andaman Nicobar and most of the northeast states, right? So what happened is that these populations, they are in low, we do not say low status, but the number of group are very, because they are very connected to the nature, right? But they are having a cooperative relationship with the mainstream. They are non-competitive relationship with the mainstream society, right? So we have a feeling of warmth towards them, we do not have a feeling of envy or jealousy towards them, right? Am I making sense of it? Yes, Dipansha, समझ में आ रहा है बच्चे?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So in this paternalistic basically means कि एक parents की जो, for example, paternalistic a feeling of warmth towards the group, right? So this target group is having a low status and having a non-cooperative relationship with the mainstream society. For example, underdeveloped countries, right? Africa is one of the underdeveloped. Many countries located in Africa are categorized under underdeveloped countries, right? They are having a low status, right? अगर comparatively करें तो developing and underdeveloped, तो they are having a low status, and also they are having a cooperative relationship or a non-competitive relationship with the mainstream society, right? That's why they have other group or mainstream have a feeling of warmth or they have a feeling of positive emotions towards them. Am I making sense? Is this clear now? Clear है ये पढ़?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, for this class, there is a site, there is a book called the Friendzoid, right? You can refer the same Friendzoid, right? I will let you know the chapter. I think it's chapter 5 or chapter 6. It's on the Internet Archive, right? This is a particular site where you can get access to the particular book, right? You can, I think they provide on a low, for example, you can borrow the book for 14 days, जैसे rapidly ना borrow करते हो या फिर 1 hour के लिए, and then you have to return that book on after 14 days or after 1 hour. Okay, so you can look over that site for this particular book, Friendzoid on Friendzoid social psychology. Or just give me, I'll just share the site. This is a book, right? So this is a Internet Archive. You can get access to this book. You can borrow for 1 hour or for 14 days. I think it's chapter, just... It's chapter 6, Stereotypes, Prejudice and Discriminations, right? Chapter 6. You can refer this book plus one more book, Barrett and Byron. So you both the books you have to refer for this topic, right? So most of the topics that I've covered is from Frenzoid, right? Some of the topics I've covered from Baron also. So I will also put that book, and for time being, you can refer this particular book, Frenzoid. Okay?
Ma'am, can you type the name of the book?
Yeah, sure. This is the fifth edition. There are many editions, but you can refer this one. Okay, can we start now? Okay, the next is the stigma. Okay? Stigma is an attribute that discredits a person or social group in the eyes of others, right? So stigma, for example, so we have stigma associated with, it could be with identities, for example, heterosexuals, homosexuals, right? इस तरह से भी हम होते हैं, bisexual होते हैं, इस तरह से भी stigmatized किए जाते हैं, right? So what happens when you attribute such, or when you attribute when this attribution or you characterize or stigmatize a particular group, it discredits, it lowers their status, it lowers their status. For example, at times the person may be फॉर एग्जाम्पल कुछ टाइम तक स्टिग्मेटाइज हम करते थे सेक्सुअलिटी के बेसिस पे, राइट? सो people get stigmatized on the basis of sexuality, right? So what happens is that it discredited, it lowers their status, right? So stigma is an attribute that basically discredits a person, that discredits a person or social group in the eyes of others. So for example, it was on the basis of sexuality, but it could be, for example, some disability के basis पे भी stigmatize करते हो, right? Because you associate some attribute towards a particular, you associate some attributes to that group, right? So what happened कि आप अगर ऐसे stigmatize करते हो, it discredits, it lowers the status of that person, of that particular group in the eyes of others, right? Are we able to understand? Class, stigma समझ में आ रहा है?
Yes, ma'am.
So this person, Erwin Goffman, 1963, distinguished the three different categories of stigma. He said there are three categories, or he categorized the stigma into three different categories. First is the tribal identities. Second is the blemishes of individual characters, and the third is the abolitions of the body. Right? So tribal identity is basically based on the basis of आपके race, right? This could be on the basis of your gender. Abolitions of the body basically means on the basis of your ability, right? So basically, we do attribute or we do stigmatize on the basis of ability also. Okay, for example, a person is stable at a particular time, at a particular time, we as an individual stigmatize them, right? So what happens, stigma से होता क्या है कि you basically discredit, you lowers the status of that persons in the eyes of the other one, right? So that happens. Stigma can have can have a long impact, or can have a larger impact on the individual, right? Okay. Okay, we'll just do what are the causes of prejudice, right? Okay, what could be the causes of prejudice? We learn about the prejudice, we learn about the stereotypes, we learn about the discrimination. What do you think that why this prejudice occurs? Why does prejudice happen?
Ma'am, due to lack of sources.
Yes, it is one of the reasons, and it is one of the reasons why this prejudice occurs, one of the reasons behind why the prejudice happens. In group competitions, right, and within that we have a realistic group conflict theory. Intergroup conflict develops from competition for limited resources. For example, prejudice happens, or this prejudice or stereotype happens, or the cause of prejudice this is one of the reasons behind it. Okay, there are limited resources. We are not talking about the national, but at times, for example, you may have competitions, right? You may have Olympics होते हैं और वर्ल्ड कप होते हैं, right? So we as a see self-criticism, right? Because there is only one cup, right? There are no this one medal, right? There is one there could be only one winner, right? So because of the limited resources, it could be any natural resources or non-natural or other resources. So because of this limited resources, and we have a competition between the two, or there's a competition, and that lead to the prejudice. So intergroup conflict develops from competition for limited resources. Groups become prejudiced towards one another because they are in conflict over competition for scarce resources. Two changes occur in each group when the groups are in conflict: increased hostility towards the opposing outgroup, intensification of in-group loyalty. So what happened? It has been seen that when we categorize, for example, there are 50 students, right? When I divide these 50 students in two groups, मैंने दो groups में divide कर दिया, दो पूरे group को, right? 25 and 25 each, and when there is a competition between them, these two things may occur, right? There will be a hostility, and there could be, I just said that we'll be having tomorrow a competition, and there could be only one winner, right? So what happened? There will be an increased hostility towards the opposite group, right? It could be possible, for example, group A may have hostility towards the group B, and group B may have a hostility towards group A, right? And there could be the intensity, there is an increased feeling, or there could be they may have an increased feeling towards the in-group, right? For example, they start identifying themselves with the group, with their groups. For example, group A members start identifying with the group A. So B members start identifying with the group B. For example, you may have seen that कि अगर हम दो groups में, it has been an experiment, right? It has been a study has been done on this, and it was seen that when we divide the group, or when we divide the students into two groups, and when we ask them that we'll be having a competitions, when we say that we'll be having a competitions, and then will be only one winner, right? So after a week, right? After a week, and between these intervals, what happened? The two groups having a very hostility towards each other. There was increased hostility towards each other, right? And the second thing, what happened was that they start identifying with the in-group members, with the group members, right? So basically, the loyalty towards the groups increase, towards the in-group increase. For example, they will form norms, they will form rules for their groups. They will have their own T-shirt, right? Whatever the groups are there, whatever the rules are there for the groups, they will start following them, right? So this increases. So it is being said that when we have a limited resources, when there is a competition between the two groups, then it leads to the prejudice, right? Okay, what could be the other reason?
Ma'am, due to some previous beliefs or experiences.
Beliefs and experiences, okay. Anyone else? Okay, I'll just share one experiment. It's a very very famous experiments, and we can discuss after that. It's a robber's cave experiment. This was a study which was done where the main, I'll just summarize what was there in the study. I'll just share one video over it on that study. So what happened in this robbers cave experiments, they basically asked the children to basically they have a camp, summer camp में बच्चों को बुलाया, right? And they asked them, they were basically, all the children were eating, having their lunch, having their dinner together, right? Then they said that we'll be having a competitions, right? After that, what happened? They divided the groups, they divided the children into two halves, and then basically the two groups, तो दो जो बच्चे थे वो अलग डायरेक्शन, अलग अलग कैंप्स में रह रहे थे. एक ही कैंप था लेकिन अलग अलग जगह पे रह रहे थे, राइट? उन्हें पता नहीं था कि देयर आर अदर ग्रुप्स आल्सो, बट व्हेन दे गेट टू नो दैट देयर आर अदर ग्रुप्स, देयर फीलिंग्स, देयर हॉस्टिलिटी इंक्रीज, दे स्टार्टेड व्हाट यू कैन से बेसिकली बहुत ज्यादा स्टिग्मेटाइज करना, ये प्रेजुडिस इंक्रीज हुआ, स्टीरियोटाइप्स, दे स्टार्टेड स्टीरियोटाइपिंग एंड this was so much intense that कि बहुत ज़्यादा harsh या even aggressively behave करना, verbally aggressive भी हो गए थे बच्चे. After that it was also resolved. So for examples, उन्होंने last में ये भी किया कि both the groups have to work together for a common purpose, right? So this helped to unite them, this helped them to reduce this prejudice, and they basically these prejudice were reduced. When you work for a common purpose, when you work for a common goal. I'll just share that video and then we can discuss after that. Just give me a few minutes, I'll just share it. This experiment is based on the realistic conflict theory. I shared the link of the video. Okay, you can just go through this. This entire study is called the Robbers Cave experiment. It's a very famous experiment in social psychology. You can find within the intergroup conflict stereotypes. You will just find this very famous experiment. I shared the link. Just go through it and then we can discuss after that.
You created a business. Now, create videos for your business.
Between 1949 and 1954, social psychologist Musafar Sharif and Carolyn Wood Sharif collaborated with graduate students to hold a series of experiments to test one of Dr. Sharif's ideas, known as realistic conflict theory. This having to do with intergroup conflict, stereotypes, and prejudices. The most famous and significant of his experiments took place in 1954 at Robbers Cave State Park in Oklahoma. Sharif's main idea was that conflict arises between groups when they're competing for limited resources. This hypothesis had important implications as the Second World War had recently ended. The experiments involved 22 children between the ages of 11 and 12. None of them knew each other previously, and all came from similar backgrounds: middle class, white, and Protestant. The experiment had 3 stages, the first being a bonding stage. Before the two groups were made aware of each other, they were encouraged to bond and create social norms by engaging in activities such as swimming and hiking. Here the groups took names, the Eagles and the Rattlers, and developed their own cultures and cultural norms. The next stage was the competition stage, lasting 4 to 6 days. In this stage, there was to be friction between the groups, and as such, a series of competitions were arranged. These competitions included baseball, tug of war, and touch football, among others. The winners would receive a trophy, medals, and pocket knives. There was no alternative prize for the losers. The Rattlers, who had developed a norm of toughness and aggression, became emphatically confident in their success. They put Rattlers' flags on the baseball field and made threats about bothering them. The researchers then manipulated situations where one group would gain at the cost of the other. What started as verbal aggression between the groups soon escalated further. After one of the baseball games, the Eagles burned the Rattlers' flag. The next day, the Rattlers raided the Eagles' cabin, flipping beds and stealing personal items. Soon, fistfights would break out, and the researchers had to physically separate the children. After the end of the conflict period, where it was announced that the Eagles were the winners, there was a reducing friction period. The groups were asked to characterize the other group, and it was found that there were profoundly negative characterizations, while holding their own group in high esteem. During this time, the two groups were brought together to engage in non-competitive activities. Sheriff believed that simple contact between the groups would not reduce friction. Instead, there would need to be common, superordinate goals to accomplish. In one event, the boys were to watch a movie together, but had to chip in money of their own. They worked together to decide the splitting of the money. They also had to work to fix an issue with a water tank and the water supply at camp, which the researchers had arranged. Likewise, one of the members enemies, but his allies with a common goal. Musafar and Carolyn Sheriff had successfully demonstrated realistic features and showed that conflict for limited resources can lead to prejudiced attitudes and discriminatory behaviors. While simple coexistence did not eliminate these prejudices,
No, ma'am, I was saying that I've watched the
together
video.
towards something better
Yes,
for
ma'am.
both groups.
Okay, this is a very famous experiment. So whenever you're in social psychology, this is a very famous experiment, right? So this Roberts scale experiments was done by Sheriff and Sheriff. So there are 3 stages that we talked about. There are few important components in this. There are few important concepts that you need to understand. They did talk about the superordinate goals. They did talk about the realistic conflict theory that we discussed. So they said that what they wanted to prove this realistic conflict theory. So they basically what happened in the first stage, the group they bond with each other and they form their own norms, their rules, their and they also give their groups a name, right? Rattlers and Eagles, right? So and when in the second stage there was a competition was held between them, and in between them, because since only one can be winner, so because of this there was prejudice, there was prejudice, stereotypes were found, right? And also the children become verbally aggressive towards each other, right? In the last stage, what happened? They wanted to reduce the frictions between these groups. So they said that maybe if the group have a contact or basically interact with each other, it will not help in reducing these intergroup conflict. But they will, if they work towards the superordinate goals, then it may help in reducing the conflict. Superordinate goal basically means a common goal. A person have a common goals, and both the groups have to work together to achieve this. For example, there was damage in the water tank. It was intentionally done by the researcher, right? The two groups had to work together to mend that tank. right? So there was they have to watch a movie. They also had to collect the money, otherwise they cannot watch that movie, right? So this was a superordinate goal. The best example could be from the history that the main agenda 1857, if you remember it, the main agenda, the main goal of that fight was that we have to fight towards a common enemy. We had a common enemy. वो common goal था, right? Britishers were the common enemy, right? So that's why all the kings or most of the kings or queens united together fight against them, right? So this is for the superordinate goal. So it is seen that whenever we have a scarce resources, we will be or there will be an intergroup conflict between the two groups. There will be a prejudice and stereotype. For example, so you may have heard at the international levels and national, there are conflict, right, related to natural resources, related to jobs, related to many other issues, right? There's also fight. So whenever whenever there is a conflict between any two groups, it will lead to prejudice. For example, so you may have heard sometimes I think last year there was an issue in some of the European countries, right? So in that, what was there? There was issue over the resources, because they were not able to get access to particular areas, or they were not able to access the particular resources, right? So when there's a conflict over a limit, because the resources is very limited. When there's a conflict between the two, it will lead to prejudice. You will be forming the prejudice and the stereotype towards that group. ये clear है? Tauber's cave experiments is a very famous experiment. You can explain whenever you explain the causes of prejudice. Under the realistic conflict theory, you can mention this. You can very briefly mention this experiment. In the first group, they did talk about the cultural norms and rules and regulations. So exactly होता क्या है? Well, for example, whenever as a group you form a group, you have a norm. For example, same as in society, right? You have your own norms, you have your own rules that you have to perform this and this function, this and this, this and this, you have to do this and this work, then only you can participate, then you can only get a certificate, right? So you have your own norms and rules and regulations, right? So it is that you said in the first year, when they bond with each other, when they started bonding, they started formulating the norms, their cultural norms, their other rules and regulations, and also they give names to their group, right? Crackers and eagles, right? So this is what happened in the first group. ये clear है? First step, second stage, and third stage in this experiment is clear. What is happening in the first stage? What is happening in the second stage, and what is happening in the third stage? Class, is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So for now, in the next class, we'll be discussing about the causes of prejudice, right? You can refer the Frenzoid. I'll share the book. I'll share the name of the book and everything, right? You can refer the book it is accessible on the Internet Archive.